reading them out to our guest TC today for our program. Thanks again for joining us today. So once again, just for those just joining us, we are recording this program. So if you prefer not to be on camera, we just ask that you disable your camera throughout the program, and we will be keeping you on mute throughout the presentation. But if you have any questions for TC or Helen during the presentation, feel free to enter them in the chat, and we'll be reading them out throughout the presentation. Thanks for joining us today.
All right, thank you so much, Pat. I'm going to go ahead and get started with my introduction. All right, are you seeing the small presentation or the big one? You're probably seeing the small one, right?
Oh, I see. No, I see the full presentation.
You see the full presentation? Fantastic.
It's not in slideshow.
Okay, great. All right.
It's not in slideshow yet.
Okay. Oh, it's not a slideshow yet. I knew that was going to happen. All right, let me switch one more time, and that will give everyone a chance to. Aha, let's try this one.
Press enough buttons, it'll work.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Okay,
There
how's
you
that?
go.
Okay,
Perfect.
I'm going to. Okay, let me make sure. And you saw it switch?
Yes.
All right, now we got it. Okay, thank you all very much for joining us today and spending your time with us. My name is Helen Dulac, and I am with the City of Dallas Environmental Quality and Sustainability, and I am super excited to be partnering with the Dallas Public Library Seed Library on this weekly Grow With Us series every Monday at noon. I just want to give you a brief summary about my department because you probably never heard of it. We actually started in 2004, and back then we were called the Office of Environmental Quality. We worked really hard for 4 years to help Dallas become the first city in the United States to achieve a special environmental certification called ISO 14001. And what that means is we looked at our operations across 14 different departments to see how we could still provide service with less of an impact on the environment. So we looked at like the fleet vehicles we had all the way to the paper we put in our copy machines, and we made changes. And every year we try to improve, and we actually are audited to make sure that we're meeting those milestones. And what's significant about this is that this was Dallas, Texas, not a city in California, not a city in Colorado, not Austin, but it was Dallas. So Dallas actually has a history of being green, and we're just trying to go greener. So let's fast forward to 10 years where a lot of changes happened in my department. We actually had a little bit of a restructuring in the city of Dallas, and we had some programs and departments join ours. And so we doubled in size, and to reflect that change, we changed our name. And that is when we became Dallas Environmental Quality and Sustainability. Also that year, with that merger, we created a combined outreach and engagement team that I'm a proud member of. The following year in 2019, Mayor Johnson created an Environment and Sustainability Committee of City Council. And they meet the first Monday of every month, and those meetings are open to the public, and they're great to watch if you want to see what's going on in the city, like the environmental pulse of the city. It will actually, and plus you'll see a lot of my coworkers on there. Now, if you have heard of our department, it's because on May 27th of this year, the City Council approved and adopted the city's first comprehensive environmental and climate action plan called CCAP. This is very historic for several reasons. We're one of the few cities in Texas that has a climate plan, and we're also one of the very few cities that is not along the coast that has a climate plan. So Dallas is really trying to mitigate climate change. We're committing to do things better and to make the environment healthier and safer for everyone. You can see all 250 pages of this plan at dallasclimateaction.com, and it's also our roadmap for the next 30 years. And as we progress with different programs and things, you're going to see that they align with the CCAP plan. And so does this series of presentations hits one of the goals of local and healthy food access. All right, I mentioned that my department doubled in size. So those groups in green are what joined us. And I want to talk about one of those just briefly, and that is stormwater. So stormwater is anytime water, whether it's rain or from your sprinkler system or your hose, leaves your property. So it'll go down your lawn, down your driveway, into the street, kind of all the way down those gutters and go to that big drain at the end of the street. Well, that big drain is called a storm drain inlet, and it's there for one reason, and that's to remove all the water off the street so they don't flood. Well, they work so great that they remove the water so quickly, it connects directly into a stream or creek. It's not cleaned and it's not treated. So if it picks up any pollution along the way, that's how pollution often gets into our waterways. And so if there's litter, if there is bacteria from pet waste that someone didn't pick up, any sort of automotive fluids that dripped into the driveway, if you put too many chemicals on your lawn, all of those things can get washed into our lakes and eventually to the Trinity River. So just remember, pollution doesn't stay at home, and also be mindful about what you're doing outside. And I mentioned the outreach and engagement team that I am a proud member of. Well, we want to empower Dallas to save the earth. And we do that by virtual presentations like this and in person when we're allowed. You can invite us to speak at no cost to your Dallas HOA meeting, local clubs and organizations. We also have a lot of material for students, anywhere from K to college. And we also have different seminars and events that we host. If you invite us to speak, what do we talk about? Well, we talk about environmental topics from A to Z, all the way from air quality to zero waste. And also our department does host some events throughout the year. On Saturday, we just had the 26th WaterWise Landscape Tour and Symposium. So the symposium has concluded, but the virtual tour is available for you to check out. You can go to savedallaswater.com to see that. Now, if you also want to learn more information, you can visit our website, greendallas.net. If you ever have a question for me or any of my coworkers, just visit greendallas@dallascityhall.com. I'm sorry, send an email. Send an email to greendallas@dallascityhall.com. And of course, follow us on social media. We are Green Dallas TX on Facebook and at Green Dallas on Twitter and Instagram. And so with that, I am super excited to be introducing our presenter today, because Wednesday is actually Veterans Day. So I want to thank Mr. Beckett for his service. Mr. Beckett serves as the founder and executive director of Veterans Produce. He is actively involved in numerous veteran support organizations and food banks addressing the needs of homeless and food insecure veterans. He himself is a retired Navy veteran with a passion for helping and making a difference in the life of a veteran, one life at a time. So TC, welcome.
Thank you, Helen. I appreciate that intro, and we're very grateful to be here to be able to talk about Veterans Produce, and then more specifically aquaponics, and so we'll cover quite a bit about both missions during this presentation. So thank you so very much for this opportunity. So yes, it's go ahead and to the next slide. So yes, as Helen mentioned, I am a retired Chief Petty Officer. You can call me Chief, and I started this program after I met a homeless man that literally lived down the road from me, and it just hit, just to say it hit too close to home really applied here. And so I decided I needed to do something. And I grew up on a farm in Indiana and know how to grow food. So I thought I would try this aspect of it. And so fast forward 6 years later, and we're still developing and improving our process. So that's a little bit about my background. The Veterans Produce program is headquartered in Texas. However, we hope to be expanding into other states shortly. So, all right, next slide. So aquaponics. The word aquaponics comes from aqua being fish farming. And if you look at the picture here, there's a fish tank on the bottom. And then ponics, the action of growing plants typically without soil. So you combine those two words together, aqua and ponics. This is where we come up with the word aquaponics. It's and so aquaculture and growing plants without water. So the byproduct of fish, raising fish in a fish tank, is ammonia. That ammonia, if you can see again on this demo or this picture, the water is pumped up to a media bed. In this case, these are stones or rocks, and it's converted through a nitrolysis cycle. So I say, essentially, you feed the fish and the fish feed the plants. There's a lot of magic that happens in between there. There's the nitrisis cycle, but essentially we feed the fish with healthy, high protein food, and their byproduct is a healthier byproduct, which gives us the good products that we need, byproduct that we need for the plants. Next slide. So why do we do aquaponics? So aquaponics is a little bit more involved than traditional agricultural farming. However, with an aquaponics system and hydroponics, we're reusing the water. We're recycling, or recycling the water, circulating the water. And so therefore, we use 90% less water. Our yields are greater, can be up to 8 to 10 times more food per square foot, because we pack our plants, or we plant our plants closer together. Unlike traditional soil, the roots would need some distance to find their own nutrients. Here in aquaponics and hydroponics, we bring fresh nutrients to the roots continuously. With that, there's an oxygen level that's provided as well, which helps the plants grow up to 30% faster. And I'll give you an example. A blend lettuce, I can harvest a head of lettuce, blended lettuce, in about 30 days from seed. So that's significantly faster than traditional soil. One of the last aspects of why we do this is that most of our produce is shipped long distances. By the time it reaches the store shelves, it's lost up to 50% of its nutritional value. So if we had access, or if you have access to locally grown food, aquaponically or hydroponically, that food tends to be 50% more nutritious. And in fact, we harvest with the roots on, and technically that plant is still absorbing nutrients from the roots. So that's actually still a live plant. So therefore, this is why we do aquaponics. Again, it's more involved. We're moving water from place to place. We have to feed our fish. We have to keep them happy. But and I'll show later at the end of this presentation, our beds are at a certain level that makes it much more easier to deal with. Next slide. So I get asked this question a lot. Where can I grow? Where can I build an aquaponics system? And my answer to that is pretty much anywhere. I sell a 10-gallon aquarium aquaponics system. It's literally a 10-gallon, what is it, 10 inches by 20 inches for inside the homes. Or you could build them as large as a commercial size system. So, so essentially, if you have a spot of well lit backyard, you could put an aquaponics system there. Rooftops are becoming quite popular. In fact, Whole Foods grows food up on their rooftops up in the Northeast. So there's a lot of different places that you can grow these. Next slide. So this is an example of a home system. The one on the right I built for one of my customers, and he had a small patch of dirt. It was less than 3 feet wide, about 25, 30 feet long, and he didn't know what to do with it. So I introduced him to aquaponics, and as you can see here, it has done quite well. So anything from a small greenhouse on up. So this is an example of a small system. This is next slide, please. This is a large scale system. This greenhouse is 6,000 square feet, or 60 by 100. And so again, it's all the same basic components. We're moving water from one end to the other. We're planting plants in rafts, and I'll cover more of that later. But this particular system uses 11,000 gallons of water. And later I'll show you my system. I use 1,000 gallons of water throughout my system. So it's all relative based on size. Next slide, please. Okay, and we'll talk more about this. I mentioned earlier, food yields could be up to 8 to 10 times more food per square foot. So using that 30 by 100 greenhouse, so the statistics tell us that we could outproduce 1 acre of traditional soil gardening. So, and if you look at the numbers here, 20,000 pounds of fish, 70,000 pounds of vegetables on a quarter of an acre, that's quite significant. So, and we'll talk about that here later on as to why that's so significant to me. So let's next slide, please. So as I mentioned briefly in the intro, having met a homeless veteran, his name was Tony, I felt compelled to do something more. And I mentioned I'm a retired chief petty officer, so as stated here, my job is to take care of sailors in my charge. But even though I'm retired, that doesn't mean I stopped caring. So I felt like I needed to do something. So 2017, we started Veterans Produce. So next slide. So this is our initial greenhouse built in Louisville, Texas. It sits on a community garden plot. And essentially, if you see in the background, there are dirt plots. They're 4 foot by 20 feet long. And so I adopted 4 of those plots, stripped them off, and I put my greenhouse on top of it. So my greenhouse, this one here turns out to be 12 by 45. And inside, I run both aquaponics and hydroponics. The production here, I can grow up to 1,000 plants at a time. And then you can see the rest of the statistics there. One of the things that makes this particular site a little bit more of a challenge is that there's no electricity here. But you'll see as I give a tour here in a minute, we have fans and we have pumps running all throughout the greenhouse. And so there's one solar panel there that was that's actually a very, very, very old picture. We now have a bank of, I think I have 8 or 10 solar panels. And so we operate completely on solar, and we generate all of our own power. We try to store as much rainwater as possible. We find that that's a better water for us. Okay, so this is our first community garden in Louisville, Texas. Next slide. So this is where we got started. So you can see the width of the beds there in the back for 4 feet, the 4 foot pathway in between, and then another 4 foot wide bed. This is where we came up with the 12 foot wide greenhouse, not by design, but just that happens to be the space that we had. So again, that gets back to the answer of where can I build a greenhouse? The answer is, or where can I build an aquaponics? The answer is, do you have space? Do you have a 4 foot wide path somewhere? And then the answer is yes, you could build an aquaponics system there, and you're outside. Next slide. So fish, the byproduct of fish is ammonia, as I talked about earlier. So we start our systems with goldfish. Goldfish are fairly cheap. If something were to go wrong, a pump failed or whatever, we haven't invested too much in our long-term stock. So we start all of our systems on goldfish. They are very accommodating to extreme temperatures, and in Texas here coming in January, February, when it gets really, really cold, the goldfish won't mind it so much. Some of the popular species of fish that we grow aquaponically are tropical tilapia. Now they do prefer, they require the water to be very warm, 70 to 75. Again, they're a tropical fish. So when the water gets too cool, they don't do well. But so for that reason, that's why I'm using goldfish here in this particular greenhouse. Next slide. These are just some of the filters that are in play. The first big filter is a settler, and it removes all of the fish effluent, and we drain it into the bucket there, that orange bucket. And then it continues on an additional set of filters. And so again, this is all just to remove the fish effluent and keep the water clean. Next slide. This is still in build process. This is the aquaponic side of the greenhouse. This on the right-hand side, these are rafts. They are styrofoam, high dense styrofoam with holes cut in them 5 or 6 inches on center. And the lettuce or produce simply floats on a bed of water. In this case, this is about 8 inches of water. On the far left-hand corner is an empty media bed, and I'll show you later what that looks like full. But that is, so we fill that with crushed granite. And that granite is where the nitrification process or the nitrisis process occurs. It collects on that crushed rock, and that's what allows the whole aquaponics system to function. Next slide. And just more build pictures. Okay, next slide. Okay, so so here, you can go to our website. There's lots of information there. You can find us on pretty much any social media site if you'd like to learn more about Veterans Produce. Just type in Veterans Produce. We're on LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. You can find us pretty much everywhere. If you have any questions, please go to the website, or you can send me an email directly here. We also are we always are seeking volunteers. We are a volunteer-run organization, and on the main page of the website is a big volunteer or sign up button. So we encourage anyone who's interested in learning more about aquaponics or hydroponics, and that once they would like to help provide a service, to sign up at the volunteers on the volunteer link. So that's the presentation part. So let me walk through the live greenhouse here. Helen, can you hear me pretty well? The wind is picking up.
We can hear you, TC.
Okay, all right. So I'm going to run around and show the current state of the greenhouse. Tell me if this is going too fast. This is the media bed that I talked about earlier. This is crushed granite, and the water basically floods this bed on its own cycle, and then drains out and continuously recycles. And in this bed, I mostly grow peppers and tomatoes. As you can see, basil grows very nicely. We're growing some melons and such in the back here. Lots of peppers. These are jalapenos. Have a little bit of a trellis going on here. But let me walk outside and show the outside, how everything operates. Again, I apologize if it's too windy out here. So this is our solar bank. This provides us with our 110 volts of power, which is what everything runs off.
So TC, how difficult was it for you to set up those solar panels and wire all that in?
So, well, that's actually a very good question. It did take some research, but the challenge was more over not understanding the demand of solar, not understanding the impact of cloudy days, because the solar, we don't operate all 24 hours around the clock on solar. We store the excess power. Well, if you don't have enough sun coming in, those batteries are not getting charged enough. And so it's been a little bit of a trial and error. I started, as you saw probably earlier in that presentation, with one panel. It was a 12-volt system. We have greatly exceeded the demand. We've added a lot more pumps, and I'll actually turn this around. You can see some of the equipment here. These are the controllers that are used. There's an inverter, and then in this box here are the 12 deep cell batteries, and we now operate on a 48-volt system. So it has taken some time and some research to make all this work. Okay, so one of the other questions that we get asked is, can I grow in different zones throughout the United States? Well, the answer is yes. We're seeing greenhouse or aquaponic systems from Africa to Alaska, two completely different extremes. In this particular case, I don't know if you can see this. This is an inflated roof. It's a double layer of greenhouse plastic. This fan is what keeps that going, inflated. And this provides a barrier, an RF barrier, an insulation barrier. As we saw on the outside of it a minute ago, we had a shade cloth. And between those two factors, that helps keeps it a little bit cooler inside of here. However, the rest of the magic occurs back here in the cool room. So now we're heading into the hydroponic side. I mentioned earlier that we run aquaponically and hydroponically. So this is the cool room. It's significantly cooler in here. And Helen, can you see this okay?
Yes.
Okay. So in this side, I have 800 plant sites or plant cells, and I'm running hydroponically in the cool room. So water is piped in through these small tubes. It's returned to the end with a gutter system, and then dropped back down into a tank, and it's recycled. Again, we're using 90% less water. So here, these plants, romaines, these are all pretty close to being harvested. They're just about big enough.
Well,
But
can you tell us what you're growing?
well, I grow 5 or 6 different varieties of lettuce. I'm growing romaine. I always grow a blend. This is a red sail. I grow Simpson. I grow Landis. I grow bibs. I really like bibs. I don't have any at the present time. We just harvested. Well, we harvested, our last harvest was 51 pounds of lettuce. If you can imagine, that's so we use these folding crates. We clean the lettuce and we use these folding crates, and I had pretty much every one of these filled up with lettuce. So yeah, I grow 5 or 6 different varieties of lettuce in the hydroponic side. There are basically 100+ different types of plants that will grow aquaponically and hydroponically. Can I grow potatoes or carrots? Radishes, you can, but there's a lot of different things that we can grow. Okay, let me come back to one more thing. The rest of the cooling is provided in this greenhouse by this wet wall. I don't know if you can see this or not, but water is sprayed on the top and it saturates these pads. And as air is pulled through here, it cools this greenhouse. So this is how, in the heat of the summer, we can operate. We can drop the temperature 16 degrees from the outside temperature.
And TC, can you explain to everybody why it's important to have those types of vegetables a little cooler, especially in the summer?
Well, so yes, very good question. Sounds like you have a little bit of farming background there, Ellen. You're asking some very good questions.
Well, maybe I've tried
lettuce,
some aquaponics and I have failed.
Okay, so yes, so lettuce actually likes it very cold. It prefers it to be cold. When the temperature gets above 70 or so degrees, some varieties of lettuce will bolt, and then they'll start trying to go to seed, and so they don't do well when it's warm. So that's why it's so very important that we keep it as cool as possible in this cool room. And in fact, we're going to be adding a water chiller to keep the water cold, and because the water is it saturates the roots, the plant technically is cool because of that. Irrespective of how warm it is, the ambient air, the roots will actually be chilled. So, so the answer to the question is most lettuces, especially the thinner like blends, the Simpson, the Landises, the very thin leaf lettuces, are very delicate and very sensitive to heat. And so we need those to be as cool as possible. The romaines and bibs being of a thicker leaf, spinach tends to handle the heat when it gets 70+, but yeah, lettuce really needs it to be cooler. So I mentioned that there's potentially hundreds of plants that we can grow aquaponically and hydroponically, and we could grow a lot more if we had more space, actually. So we are in a funding campaign to build a second greenhouse on premise here, and the goal is to try to help feed as many homeless and food insecure veterans as we can possibly reach. So you mentioned earlier in my intro, we are also supporting now the food banks, the Salvation Army, the CCA. There's a number of food pantries that we are supporting because the COVID has hit so many people, and the demand for food at food banks has increased exponentially. So essentially, I'm trying to grow food as fast as possible so that we can help support as many organizations as possible.
Well, thank you.
And with that, I'll turn it back over to any questions.
All right. Well, I must applaud your efforts because this is a pretty brave thing you've done, you know, kind of jumping into, so you said you grew up as a farmer, but you probably grew up as farming in the soil, not farming in the water.
Right. No. In fact, actually, to make that story even worse, we hand piped our water out of a well. So it was very laborious. So yes, it was all done in the soil. And I thank you for bringing that up because I forgot to mention. So with an aquaponic system, you see these beds they're 30, I don't know, they're 30 inches off the deck. We don't deal with a lot of the issues that soil agriculture deals with. We don't have weeds. It waters itself. It's not backbreaking. It's cooler, and I could go on and on and on as to why we do this. But those very reasons, the fact that these beds are actually built at a wheelchair height. This is ADA width. It's a 4-foot width between these beds, and so someone in a wheelchair could actually tend these beds. So for, again, the reasons why I do aquaponics, yes, it's more complicated, but the benefits are so much more significant to me. The fact that I can grow year round, and that, again, we get asked that question a lot. Now that it's cooler, do I have to stop growing? No, we will continue harvesting, hopefully 40 to 50 pounds a week all through wintertime.
That's fascinating. Okay, so could you please one more time explain the difference between hydro and aquaponics? And also, I want to see the fish.
You want to see the fish? Okay.
I wanted to see the fish too, I'm not gonna lie.
Okay. All righty, let's see if they'll come up. Can you see?
Oh, so how big are they?
These are 5-year-old goldfish.
Wow.
They're pretty big. They're a little shy. They've been fed. They go back down to the bottom after they've been fed. I don't know if that's showing up or not.
Yes, we can see them.
Okay, great. So the difference between hydroponics and aquaponics is the source of water. So aqua farming, fish water. This side of the greenhouse is the aquaponic side. That water only circulates through these beds. The hydroponics uses an organic nutrient, and that we have to mix and add. And it's a different technique for monitoring and growing. It's you would think water is water, but no, water is not just water. So we measure and we deal with different aspects. So if I don't feed the fish healthy food, they don't produce healthy byproduct. And hydroponics, if I don't provide enough nutrients in there, then of course the plants don't get their nutrients. So the difference is the source of water.
All
TC,
right.
Do they,
Yes.
is that an environment where the goldfish will multiply?
Well, yes. However, they tend to eat the fry. So
Oh, okay.
I have a nursery at home that if I want to spawn fish, I would take some mating pairs out, mate them, and then when they spawned, take them and put them back into the tank. But I need to allow the fish babies to grow up big enough that they can swim fast enough and not be eaten. So
Yeah.
and there are other species that they eat their own as well. So I've raised catfish, I've raised perch, I've raised goldfish and tilapia. Very rarely do any of the baby eggs ever survive. So yeah, you have to pull them out and spawn them separately.
Okay, thanks.
So
That's a
speaking
good
of
question.
these,
I never thought of that.
so speaking about these other
Yes.
types of fish, do you think you will ever move away from goldfish in your current operation?
So yes, however, being that we provide all of our food to food centers or food banks, we have to be able to accommodate harvesting fish. And right now we don't have such a kitchen that can harvest fish. So we won't grow any at this particular site. We won't grow any edible fish. We'll just continue to incorporate goldfish. At some of our other sites, we've got a greenhouse in Color, and we will harvest the fish. We've got a couple more projects. One starting off. Matter of fact, we're breaking ground Saturday up in Decatur. and we will be harvesting tilapia there as well. So, but at this particular site, any of the food banks, food centers they can't receive fresh fish.
Okay.
If
so
I
you
had
also- Oh, please go ahead.
Oh no, if I had an on-site freezer, and there's probably regulations, food regulations that right now I think that would prevent me from harvesting the fish. So there's a few more steps involved with that.
Good point. Good point. So you mentioned that you collect and use rainwater. And
We do.
could you talk a little bit more about that and why you have more success with the rainwater? And also kind of talk about, because your water's not hitting a normal household roof.
Our water's not hitting a normal household.
Yeah, so you're not picking up things off of a roof because, right, you're collecting it off of your greenhouse?
The greenhouse, correct. Yeah. So we have basically it's a PVC gutter system that sits on the north side of the greenhouse, and so yeah, it's just plastic, and it collects the water pretty much straight off. So the benefit of rainwater is that it's pH neutral. Water that comes out of the city utility systems has chloramine. And we don't use chlorine anymore, but it's a chlorine ammonia bond, and so that chlorine actually kills the ecosystems inside hydroponics and aquaponics, more so aquaponics. So that natural process I was talking about, the breakdown of ammonia into nitrites and nitrates, well, if we had chlorine in the water, it would kill that natural ecosystem. So we have to remove that. Right now, I do that with a chloramine removing filter. So the question is if I had a cleaner source of water, why not use that? Well, so when it rains, we certainly collect as much rain as possible. We don't have to remove chlorine from rainwater, and the pH is a very neutral pH, and so we don't have to buffer the pH up or down as well. So the level of the pH is very, very important in water-based growing because the nutrients have to have it at a certain range. Specifically, lettuce is 5.5 to 6.5 pH. The water that comes out of utility grid, your public water, right now here it's 7.8. So clearly that's 2 points off, and I need to reduce that down. So it takes a lot more work to reduce that down. So rainwater is truly the best way to go all the way around.
That's fascinating.
Very good question.
Yeah. So I've always wanted a pond in my backyard. And I always said, well, I always told my husband, I go, well, not only will it be beautiful, we can grow our own food in it. I could put up a raft, kind of like what you showed and all this sort of stuff. And he's like, well, how much water is, yes, exactly. Why I could have that in my backyard.
So this is that's a koi pond that's been converted into an aquaponics. So the question is, do you have enough fish? It's really all about that. If you have the appropriate amount of fish, and then, so the question is how much fish do you have to have? And so there's a formula, it's 5, 1, and 1. It's 5 gallons of water for every 1 pound of fish, roughly. And then every gallon of water that you have can accommodate 1 square foot of growing space. So 5, 1, and 1. So if in your koi pond you had approximately 1 pound of fish for every 5 gallons of water, then you've got more than enough fish and byproduct in there to have an aquaponic system. So yeah, we can convert. As a matter of fact, aquaponics predates the Aztec Indians and the Incas. Lake Titicaca is an active, or was an active, aquaponics lake. So they would strap reeds together, or bamboo poles together, put peat moss in the middle of those grooves and plant their seeds, and then push the rafts out together into the lake, and then that's where they grew. So a big body of fish or fish water, and then you've got an aquaponic system.
Good point. I still need to sell my husband on that, but I'm working on it. So
Okay.
Okay, we had a question about, do you have some maybe books or resources that you can recommend for somebody who wants to learn more about aquaponics or hydroponics, or even get started?
Okay. So there is, yes, just the short answer. There are some books that I can recommend. If they will go to the website, go to the contact us, fill out a form and put in the memo field, would like more information, and I will send them some information. In addition to that, we are putting together training modules for folks that want to learn about aquaponics, or folks that want to build their own system. We're putting together training modules for that. The demand for our services to help folks build their own greenhouses is more than what we can accommodate. And so we're going to start selling plans for people to build their own greenhouses. We will provide the consulting services or the oversight services to help them with that. So eventually we will be providing that very information. But yes, there are some books that I can recommend. It is important to validate the information because there's an awful lot of information on YouTube, but you really need to bounce it against valid information. And I can help with some of that. Which brings me to a point that I didn't talk about. We have a 4-part mission at Veterans Produce. We feed homeless veterans. We teach them how to grow their own food. We bring them into the greenhouse and we put them into an apprentice program. So we teach them how to grow their own food. We teach them about aquaponics and hydroponics, how to operate the greenhouse. Then ultimately, we want to train them well enough that they can duplicate this model in other communities across the nation, serving more homeless veterans. So that's a win-win for them. We've helped reskill homeless veterans. It's a win-win for us because it gives me more resources to continue building greenhouses. I alluded to earlier that we have more greenhouses than we can keep up with as far as a demand. So what we're doing to meet that is we've partnered with with several veteran organizations. I briefly talked about, we have a breaking ground Saturday with a veteran organization called Valor Ranch in Decatur. And so where there's a perfect symbiotic relationship between us and veteran organizations are those that are transitioning homeless veterans off of the street into tiny homes. There's a lot of tiny home programs. And so Up in Valor Ranch is one of those tiny home programs. And so when they build the tiny homes, well, actually they're done now, we come in, we build a community garden. The veterans, homeless veterans, have access to food. We'll teach them how to grow and operate the greenhouse and the aquaponics systems. And then the excess of that food can be sold off for profit. So that's how we are addressing the demand for additional greenhouses, is that we're partnering with other veteran organizations. And then we'll come in, we'll be able to build the community gardens.
So it sounds like if you could clone yourself, things would be a little bit better, right?
Yes. I don't think we're there yet in science, but yes. So, but if we have enough volunteers where I don't have to be here, then that's great. And so one of the reasons that we're doing these classes online is that I can do web conferences with folks and help oversee some of the programs and be at more places at one time instead of physically being there.
I understand. I'm going to put the link in the chat for if anyone's interested in volunteering. There is a Sign Up Genius page that you can select shifts, and you can also help with different activities. Could you tell us what it's like to volunteer there?
Yes, absolutely. So we have 3 different functions. On the Sign Up Genius, there's 2. We have the daily checks. Every morning, we have someone come through and pick up
I think he froze.
Uh-oh, I think we lost TC. All right, so hopefully he'll come back soon. So there are a few book lists from the Dallas Public Library about these topics, and those links are in the chat. And then also there is a link for the volunteering for Veterans Produce, and they have different days of the week that you can volunteer, and they have usually morning shifts. Oops, yep, we lost TC. He'll have to join us momentarily. One thing I did want to share is I've dabbled in aquaponics a little bit, and I've had mild success. I've actually done aquaponics inside my house, and I've also done it a little bit outside. But if you are kind of interested in maybe getting started and you just want to literally get your feet wet, and TC mentioned that he has like a 10-gallon kit. There are also things like this. These are like, you can buy these at like pet stores and different things like that. They might make good holiday gifts. And this is something you can kind of do just to help build your confidence to take on a larger project, or adding something to your backyard. Now,
I always wanted to
honestly,
try one of these out. Does it work well, Helen?
so you know what? That was going to be my next disclaimer, Pat, is obviously it's still in the box and I haven't
Okay,
tried
I
it.
didn't know if you took it out yet or
Yeah,
not.
exactly. So there is a chance that this might have been not a good investment. You know, maybe it's like one of those as seen on TV things.
Because
But-
I'd seen I looked at the reviews and stuff, and some people said that their plants grew, some said they didn't. So I was just kind of curious because I was looking at those like last year.
Right. And so actually, let me open it. You can see it's still taped shut.
You're gonna do
So
the
let me-
unboxing on the
Yeah, we're going to do an unboxing while we wait for TC to come back. So,
fish not included.
yeah, right. So it comes with this little book, or actually it's a pretty big book. It comes with this big book. And actually, do you think you could spotlight me, please?
Let's see.
All right. Okay. And oh, it comes with a whole bunch of stuff. So,
TC's coming back.
is he coming back in?
Yeah. Oh.
Oh yeah, so it's got like seed packs and different stuff here. This is where your fish lives, hopefully, successfully. And
Hi,
you know,
Hal.
it says it's hey TC, you made it. That's okay. I was filling the time for you.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right, so you were talking to us about what a volunteer experience is like.
Yes. Okay. So the daily checks, how much of that did you hear?
That's all we heard was daily checks.
Okay, yes. So the daily checks, it's just a status check to make sure that the fish are happy. The behavior of the fish tells you, can tell us a lot of things. If they're unhappy, if they don't come up to eat, then that's systemic of something that they're not happy with. So is it temperature? Is it lack of oxygen? Is it some impurity that got in the water or something? But so for that reason, we do like daily checks. It takes about 45 minutes, basically, to walk through and just check on everything, make sure the water's running, make sure there's no leaks. The second thing that we really need, though, is on Mondays and Fridays. We harvest on those days, and we can harvest, several hundred plants at a time. I mean, I mentioned earlier that we harvested 51 pounds. I don't even know how many hundreds of plants that was, but 51 pounds of lettuce. So we had 4 people here. It took us about 2 or 3 hours. And so when we harvest, we take the troughs out, we clean them, we bring them back in, and then we transplant the seedlings. So at the same time that we're growing, we're starting new seedlings so that we're constantly supplying ourselves with new plants. So Monday is the main day. Fridays at times, I'll send out a broadcast email looking for additional volunteers. But on Sign Up Genius, there's 2 slots. Mondays is harvest and transplant, but every other day is the daily checks.
So it sounds like harvest and transplant is probably the most fun day.
The most fun day. Well, it's a lot of work. It is fun. It's really nice to see, the lettuce, that started from a seed, it's matured, we clean it, we put it in the tote, so we deliver it. I mean, that whole life cycle, and the fact that it's grown right here locally and it's serving homeless right here in the community. To me, that's the rewarding aspect of it.
Absolutely. And how long did you say it takes your lettuce to grow in your system?
Excuse me. The blend lettuce like Landis and Simpson, we can harvest those in about 30 days from transplant.
And how come it is so much faster in your system than when you're doing it in soil?
So again, the nutrients are constantly being resupplied to the roots, as is oxygen. So the water, as it's passing through the systems, it's picking up nutrients, it's picking up oxygen, and those are that readily available nutrient base is not. It's just really not available in soil. The roots are sort of locked up in the soil. So I think it's the right balance of the right amount of water and nutrients that's brought to the roots that actually enables it to grow so much quicker. The roots aren't competing for nutrients. The nutrients are being brought to the roots.
Good point. All right, so you mentioned that your system uses 1,000 gallons of water. That to someone like me, that sounds like a lot of water. But yet you were talking about how this
Yes,
uses so much less water. That's just
correct.
kind of hard for me to wrap my head around. I mean, do you have like evaporation loss and different things like that? It's just 1,000 gallons just sounds like a lot.
So everything is covered. The rafts that I showed you earlier, the styrofoam sits on top of the water, so there's no water loss there. Everything is piped through pipes. The fish tank is covered. The main sump that's the repository where all the extra water is housed. And so between all of the water that's in the rafts, in the fish tank, and all the filters, in the fish, the media bed, and the sump, all of that adds up. I was 50, 60, 180. I mean, it all adds up to close to 1,000 gallons. But that water is recirculated. The only water we lose is a little bit due to evaporation and absorption, but for the most part, the water just continuously recycles. I can't tell you the last time I ever had to add water to the aquaponics side.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, it really is in this day of age where fresh water is so precious, and where this is heading, which is one of the additional reasons why I'm so interested in sticking with the aquaponics and the hydroponics. Vertical hydroponics is one of the fastest growing techniques for growing food. We're trying to meet the upwards demand of 70% more food by the year 2050. And vertical hydroponics is being looked at as one of the candidates to be able to do that. Our soil is tired, our water levels are low, our farmers are retiring faster than new farmers are being created. So one of the things that we're hoping to do through Veterans Produce is to create more aquaponic farmers. But we're not using resources. We're not touching the soil. We're not using up the water because it's recirculated. So, and then as I mentioned earlier, we can grow up to 8 to 10 times more food. So to give you an idea of how significant vertical hydroponics is becoming, there is a large greenhouse, 2.7 million square foot greenhouse that just got funded in Kentucky. Look up Martha Stewart hydroponics or vertical hydroponics. You'll find the articles for that. 2.7 million square foot vertical hydroponic system in Kentucky. So these systems are sprouting up. I mentioned earlier, Whole Foods grows their food on the rooftop. Two of the largest hydroponics facilities is in upstate New York. These are hundreds of thousands of square feet. So this is definitely a very viable solution and very scalable. So even though I've got a small scale size footprint greenhouse, we can still generate a significant or make a significant impact in the demand in our communities. And the fact that it is so small, we can put them pretty much anywhere.
Absolutely, that's amazing. So a lot of times, people hear about hydroponics and aquaponics, but we don't actually get to see it and then completely understand what it's capable of.
So with that in mind, if Carlos wants to throw up that last slide there, again with the address of our site or the website, people can sign up, request a tour. We give tours throughout the week when I'm here. Tuesdays and Thursdays, I'm at another greenhouse, but Monday, Wednesday, Fridays, Saturdays, sometimes Sundays, I'm available for tours. But moreover, come and sign up and do volunteer, with us for a day. And there's nothing better than, learning firsthand by actually doing. So they'll be feeding the fish, they'll be checking for, any pests, they'll be checking water levels, we check for temperatures, just all the things that are important inside the greenhouse. And so again, that only takes about 45 minutes, 30 to 45 minutes as a walkthrough to do that. So we highly request or encourage anyone that wants to learn more to come do a tour or to come volunteer. I mentioned earlier, we are in a donation campaign. We're halfway funded to build our second greenhouse on this site, hopefully. And so we're also looking for, we're continuing to do donation campaigns and looking for sponsors to help build our next greenhouse. So there's lots of ways that people can get involved, but sure, we welcome the tours, but moreover, we welcome the help to help us continue to operate.
Fantastic. All right, TC, I got one last question for you. Are you familiar with GMO seeds and like what kind of seeds you use? And then if if you are able to get more than one harvest off of, for example, a seedling, does that seedling, can that ever change? Like if you're using non-GMO, does it always stay non-GMO?
Well, we only use non-GMO seeds. Johnny Seeds is our primary source. We also use Baker Creek, but Johnny Seeds for us is a highly productive seed. So it's a very good reputable source. So we do use non-GMO seeds. But the second part of your question, can we do multiple harvests off of plants? We can. And we tried to do that. Romaine lettuce, for an example, can grow up to a pound. It can grow pretty tall, 12, 14 inches tall. And we tried that one cycle to just harvest the outer leaves. You can cut some lettuces off and they will regrow 2 or 3 times before they start bolting. However, I have 800 plant sites in my greenhouse. The amount of time it takes me to do that versus just pulling the whole plant and then replacing it, it's about 3 times more work to do that. But to answer your question, yes, these seeds they will continue to grow. And then with the tomatoes as well, they will regenerate. Most anyone knows that you can pull off suckers and restart them. They will continue to root. So, but yeah, no, we use, so this is all organic. We use no pesticides, no chemicals whatsoever. This is a community organic garden that we're sitting on. With aquaponics, you can't spray stuff on your plants to begin with. You can't spray pesticides. I mean, you can, but you'll kill the fish. So if you kill the fish, you kill the system. So therefore, you can't cheat. But anyway, we follow the USDA good agriculture practices. That's the guidelines and the checklist that we conform to. The first thing that everyone does when they walk in the greenhouse, they wash their hands. It doesn't matter. I wash my hands continuously throughout my greenhouse. I have a sink in the greenhouse. So that's the very first thing that we do. Food safety.
Fantastic. Well, TC, I cannot thank you enough for your time and for this wonderful work that you're doing. We are coming up to the top of the hour. I also want to thank you for your service and wish you a happy Veterans Day. And if there's anything left you want to close with, please do.
And thank you for allowing me to talk about Veterans Produce. I know the segment was primarily about the aquaponics, but I thought that it was important to see how aquaponics is being applied in real time. And so, we've got we're partnered with a lot of veteran organizations, and one of them is the Travis Manion Foundation. And their motto is, if not me, then who? I wear that wristband to ask myself that or remind myself that a lot. If not me, then who? Even though I'm retired, these are my brothers, that are homeless, that are going without food. They're dealing with so much. Where to get their next meal should be the least of their concerns. And so I felt I needed to do something. I did not know where this was going to go when I started it in 2017. But where it is today, we now have 9 other projects that we're in the process of working on, potentially heading down to Houston here shortly, and then East Coast. We've got some requests to go to the East Coast. So wherever the demand is for feeding homeless veterans, we can certainly go. So I appreciate this time to be able to share about that. And please, if anybody has any additional questions, send me an email, go to the website, fill out the contact form. If anyone's looking for training information, we can help with that as well. So Helen, thank you so very much for allowing me this opportunity.
You're welcome. And thank you for sharing your time. I learned so much, and I hope people do check out that website. So I'll let the library close us out.
Yeah, thanks again, TC. That was a really nice closing statement on that. We appreciate everything that y'all are doing and for presenting this to our patrons today. Thank you everyone for joining, and Helen for obviously always finding us really great partners to work with to get this information shared, so we can keep moving forward and taking care of our plants and do things like that we'd like to do ourselves. So thank you. But I will be sharing the recording, and this is up on our YouTube page if you do want to share it with anyone. And we can share the presentation that TC gave us today. But yeah, I thank you everyone for joining us today. Take care.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you all.